Welcome to another inspiring journey where you will not only improve your English but also discover the incredible story of one of the greatest minds in history. Today we are going to explore the life of Albert Einstein, a man whose ideas transformed the world forever. As you listen, pay attention to the new words, expressions, and useful phrases that will help you strengthen your English skills. This story is more than just a biography. It is a powerful lesson about curiosity, determination, and the courage to think differently. So grab your notebook, stay focused, and get ready to improve your listening skills, expand your vocabulary, and find inspiration in the remarkable life of Albert Einstein, childhood of a future genius. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879 in the city of Ulm, Germany. His parents, Hermann Einstein and Pauline Koch, lived simple lives. Hermann worked in the electrical industry, while Pauline loved music and valued education. When Albert was born, nobody imagined that this little boy would one day become one of the most influential scientists in history. In fact, there was nothing unusual about him except for one interesting feature. His head was slightly larger than average, and this often became a topic of family jokes. No one could have guessed that this quiet child would later change humanity's understanding of the universe. As a young boy, Albert was unusually calm and reserved. He spoke very little and did not begin speaking properly until he was almost 3 years old. Naturally, this worried his parents. Some people even believed that there might be something wrong with him. Because he rarely talked, his family often referred to him as the quiet child. But Albert's silence was not a sign of weakness. Instead, it reflected his deep curiosity and thoughtful nature. He spent long hours observing everything around him, trying to understand how things worked and why the world behaved the way it did. When Albert was 5 years old, his father gave him a small compass. Although it looked like a simple object, it would have a profound impact on his life. Albert became fascinated by the mysterious needle that always pointed north. No matter how he moved the compass, the needle continued to return to the same direction. This simple experience filled him with wonder. He wanted to understand the invisible force responsible for this strange behavior. For hours he stared at the compass, trying to uncover its secret. It was during this moment that Albert first realized that unseen forces existed in nature. From that day onward, he developed an endless desire to explore the mysteries of the universe. Years later, Einstein admitted that this experience left a deep impression on him and inspired his lifelong passion for science. However, school was not always an enjoyable experience for young Albert. The education system at that time focused heavily on discipline and memorization. Students were expected to follow instructions without asking too many questions, but Albert was different. He was not interested in memorizing facts without understanding them. He wanted explanations. He wanted to ask questions and discover the reasons behind everything. Unfortunately, many of his teachers did not appreciate his approach. Some considered him stubborn, while others thought he lacked discipline. One teacher even predicted that Albert would never achieve anything significant in life. Although such comments hurt him, Albert refused to let criticism destroy his confidence. Certain subjects, especially languages, were difficult for him. Yet there was one subject that captured his imagination more than anything else: mathematics. To Albert, mathematics was like the language of nature itself. Solving equations felt like solving fascinating puzzles, and he enjoyed every challenge that numbers presented. Despite the difficulties he faced at school, his family always supported his interest. His mother, Pauline, encouraged him to learn the violin. At first, Albert disliked practicing, but over time, music became one of his greatest passions. It helped him relax and often gave him fresh ideas. His uncle Jacob also played an important role in developing his love for mathematics. Instead of making learning boring, Jacob turned it into an exciting adventure. He once explained to Albert that mathematics was like a treasure hunt, where every problem contained clues leading to a hidden answer. This creative approach made learning enjoyable and strengthened Albert's passion for numbers. Unlike many children his age, Albert preferred books over games, while others spent their free time playing outside. He enjoyed reading and imagining how the universe worked. He admired great scientists and dreamed that one day he might make important discoveries of his own. One day, while walking home, a fascinating thought entered his mind. What would happen if I could travel alongside a beam of light? This unusual question stayed with him for years. Little did he know that this simple thought would eventually lead to ideas that would revolutionize modern physics and change the world forever. Education and the road to Switzerland. When Albert Einstein turned 15, his life changed dramatically. His father's business suffered serious losses, forcing the family to move to Italy in search of a fresh start. However, Albert remained in Germany because he was expected to complete his education. Being separated from his family made him feel lonely and unhappy. At the same time, he was becoming increasingly frustrated with the rigid school system. The strict rules and harsh teaching methods left him feeling trapped. Eventually, Albert reached a decision that surprised many people. He chose to leave school before graduating. To others, it seemed like a terrible mistake. Many believed that he had destroyed his future. But Albert saw things differently. He believed that true education was not about blindly following rules. It was about understanding, questioning, and discovering. Instead of attending classes, Albert began studying independently. He spent countless hours reading books on mathematics, science, and philosophy. Day after day, he taught himself subjects that genuinely interested him. Although his decision appeared risky, Albert trusted his own ability to learn. He valued knowledge more than certificates and believed that curiosity was the greatest teacher of all. At the age of 16, he wrote one of his earliest scientific papers. While it was far from perfect, it revealed his extraordinary imagination and passion for understanding the universe. Around the same time, Albert applied to the famous Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, one of Europe's leading institutions for science and engineering. Confident in his mathematical abilities, he took the entrance examination. However, the results brought disappointment. Although he performed exceptionally well in mathematics and physics, he struggled with subjects such as French, literature, and history. As a result, he failed the entrance exam. For many people, this would have been the end of the dream. But Albert refused to let failure define him. Instead of losing hope, he accepted the challenge. He enrolled in a school in Aarau, Switzerland, where he could strengthen his weaker subjects and prepare himself for another opportunity. Life in Switzerland was completely different from what he had experienced in Germany. The schools encouraged students to think independently and express their opinions freely. This environment suited Albert perfectly. For the first time, he felt truly comfortable in an educational system. Teachers treated students with respect and encouraged creativity instead of demanding blind obedience. During this period, Albert continued developing his unique way of thinking. He often spent hours imagining strange scientific situations and asking questions that most people never considered. One of his favorite thought experiments involved light itself. He wondered what the world would look like if someone could travel at the same speed as a beam of light. These ideas may have seemed unusual to others, but they reflected the remarkable imagination that would later revolutionize science. After months of hard work and determination, Albert decided to apply once again to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School. This time, his efforts paid off. At the age of 17, he successfully passed the entrance examination and began studying in Zurich. However, entering one of Europe's finest institutions did not mean that all his problems had disappeared. Albert possessed an independent spirit and a rebellious personality. He loved mathematics and physics, but he had little interest in subjects that failed to capture his imagination. Because of this, some professors found him difficult to understand. They believed he lacked discipline and often criticized his unconventional methods. Unlike many students who followed every lecture carefully, Albert preferred to study on his own. He spent much of his time exploring deeper questions. What exactly is light? How does time work? Why does gravity exist? These questions fascinated him far more than memorizing facts for examinations. Although some teachers viewed him as stubborn, Albert remained committed to thinking independently. He understood something that would later become one of his greatest strengths. Real discoveries are made not by accepting everything without question, but by daring to ask questions that nobody else is asking. Little by little, the young dreamer from Germany was moving closer to the path that would eventually make him one of the greatest scientific minds the world had ever known. Life at the Polytechnic and the struggle to find success after finally entering the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. Albert Einstein felt that he had found a place where he truly belonged. Surrounded by talented students and advanced scientific ideas, he was excited to begin the next chapter of his life. Yet, despite studying at one of Europe's finest institutions, Albert's journey was far from smooth. He was passionate about mathematics and physics, but he paid little attention to subjects that failed to interest him. His independent personality often brought him into conflict with professors. Unlike most students, Albert disliked simply memorizing information. He preferred to explore ideas on his own and challenge traditional ways of thinking. Some professors admired his intelligence, but others viewed him as rebellious and undisciplined. One of his teachers once remarked that although Einstein was highly gifted, he lacked the discipline required to become truly successful. But Albert remained true to himself. Instead of following every lecture, he often spent his time reading scientific books and conducting his own studies. While many students focused only on passing examinations, Albert was fascinated by deeper mysteries. He constantly asked himself questions that few people dared to consider. What is the true nature of light? Can time behave differently under certain conditions? What hidden laws govern the universe? These questions occupied his mind day and night. During his years at the Polytechnic, Albert met a remarkable young woman named Mileva Maric. She was the only female student in the physics department and shared the same passion for science that inspired Albert. Their friendship grew quickly. Together, they spent long hours discussing mathematics, physics, and scientific theories. They exchanged ideas, solved problems, and encouraged each other to pursue their dreams. Mileva was not only Albert's classmate but also his closest intellectual companion. The two dreamed of making important discoveries together and hoped to build a future dedicated to science. Albert often wrote letters expressing his excitement about their shared ambitions. He believed that together they could contribute something meaningful to the world. However, life was not easy for either of them. At that time, women in science faced many challenges and unfair criticism. Meanwhile, Albert struggled financially and often worried about his future. Despite these difficulties, they remained determined and continued supporting one another. In 1900, at the age of 21, Albert graduated from the Swiss Federal Polytechnic with a degree in physics. He was full of hope and dreamed of becoming a professor or researcher, but reality proved far more difficult than he had imagined. After graduation, Albert applied for several academic positions. He hoped that universities would recognize his talent and offer him a place where he could continue his research. Unfortunately, rejection followed rejection. Many professors refused to recommend him because they considered him unconventional and believed he lacked discipline. No matter how many applications he sent, the answers were always the same. There were no opportunities. Months passed, and Albert became increasingly frustrated. He had devoted years to his studies, yet he was unable to secure a position in the scientific world. For many people, such disappointment would have been enough to destroy their dreams, but Albert Einstein refused to surrender. Instead of giving up, he accepted temporary jobs and searched tirelessly for ways to support himself. Although life was uncertain, his love for science remained stronger than ever. He continued reading, thinking, and developing new ideas. Deep inside, Albert believed that his time would come. He understood that setbacks were not signs of failure. They were simply obstacles that tested determination. Without realizing it, the young graduate who faced rejection after rejection was moving toward a turning point that would change not only his own life, but the entire history of science. Soon, an unexpected opportunity would arrive, one that seemed ordinary at first, yet would eventually become the foundation of his greatest discoveries, the patent office and the miracle year. After years of disappointment and countless rejections, Albert Einstein finally received an opportunity in 1902. Through the help of a friend, he secured a position as a clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. Although the job had nothing to do with scientific research, Albert accepted it with gratitude. His responsibility was to examine patent applications and determine whether new inventions were truly original. To many people, it seemed like an ordinary office job, but for Albert Einstein, it became something far more valuable. At first, he felt disappointed. He had dreamed of becoming a professor, not a government employee, yet instead of complaining about his circumstances, he decided to make the best of them. The work itself was not demanding, which left him with enough time to think deeply about scientific problems. Slowly, the patent office became his personal laboratory of ideas. While reviewing inventions during the day, Albert spent his evenings and nights exploring the mysteries that had fascinated him since childhood. Questions about light, space, time, and energy occupied his thoughts constantly. He filled notebooks with calculations and theories, determined to pursue his passion no matter how difficult life became. Around this time, Albert's relationship with Mileva Maric grew stronger. After years of friendship and companionship, the couple decided to get married. In 1903, Albert and Mileva began their life together with a simple wedding ceremony. Soon afterward, they welcomed their first son, Hans Albert Einstein. Although becoming a father brought joy into Albert's life, it also increased his responsibilities. His modest salary was barely enough to support his growing family. They lived in a small apartment and often struggled financially. Money was limited, and a life was far from comfortable. Many of Albert's friends advised him to stop chasing impossible dreams and focus entirely on his stable job. According to them, scientific research was uncertain and unlikely to bring success, but Albert refused to abandon the passion that had guided him since childhood. He once believed that a life without purpose was far more difficult than a life filled with challenges. So, despite working full-time and caring for his family, he continued studying and developing his theories late into the night. His dedication was extraordinary. While most people slept, Albert was busy exploring ideas that would eventually transform modern science. Then came the year that changed everything. The year was 1905. Albert Einstein was only 26 years old, and he was still working at the patent office. Yet within a single year, he published 4 scientific papers that would revolutionize humanity's understanding of the universe. Historians later called this period his miracle year. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect and described how light behaves like tiny packets of energy called photons. This remarkable discovery would later earn him the Nobel Prize in Physics. His second paper provided convincing evidence for the existence of atoms, something that many scientists still questioned at the time. The third paper introduced the special theory of relativity. This groundbreaking theory challenged traditional ideas about space and time. It revealed that time and distance are not fixed but can change depending on motion. From this theory emerged one of the most famous equations in history, E=mc². This equation demonstrated that matter and energy are deeply connected and can be transformed into one. Another Albert's ideas shocked the scientific community. How could an unknown patent clerk, without a university position, produce discoveries that challenged centuries of established thinking? Scientists across Europe were astonished. Suddenly, people began paying attention to the young man from the patent office. His brilliance could no longer be ignored. What had once seemed like an ordinary life was becoming something extraordinary. Years of rejection, loneliness, and financial hardship had not defeated him. Instead, those struggles had strengthened his determination and prepared him for greatness. Without realizing it, Albert Einstein had just taken his first step toward becoming one of the most celebrated scientists in human history, and for the first time, the world was beginning to recognize the genius that had quietly been developing all along. As the 20th century moved forward, Albert Einstein was no longer just a quiet thinker working behind the scenes. His ideas were beginning to reshape the way humanity understood the universe itself. Worldwide recognition. At first, Einstein's theories were met with silence and confusion. But slowly across Europe, scientists began to realize something extraordinary. These ideas actually worked. What once sounded abstract and strange was now becoming the foundation of modern physics. The question spread everywhere. Who is this man who can explain the universe so differently? Professorship Einstein was soon invited to teach at leading universities. From a struggling patent clerk, he transformed into a respected professor whose lectures attracted students and scientists alike. Yet he never acted like a traditional academic. His thinking was free, playful, and deeply imaginative, more like a philosopher of the cosmos than a formal scientist. General theory of relativity. In 1915, Einstein revealed his greatest masterpiece, the general theory of relativity. He proposed something revolutionary. Gravity is not an invisible force pulling objects, but the bending of space and time itself. Massive objects like stars and planets curve the fabric of the universe, and everything else simply follows those curves. It was as if Einstein had rewritten the rules of reality. World War I, while his scientific ideas were rising, the world was falling into chaos. World War I broke out, dividing nations and destroying peace across Europe. Einstein, a strong supporter of peace, opposed the war. Amid global destruction, his theories quietly continued to grow, offering a different kind of vision, one based on understanding, not conflict. Growing fame as evidence slowly confirmed his predictions. Einstein's name spread far beyond scientific circles. Newspapers, universities, and the public all wanted to know more about him. The once unknown patent clerk had become a global icon of intelligence, but fame never changed his purpose. He wasn't chasing attention, He was chasing truth. By now, Albert Einstein was no longer just a scientist. He had become a symbol of a new way of thinking. But recognition did not arrive in the way people expected. The Nobel Prize that wasn't about relativity. In 1921, Einstein was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. Surprisingly, it wasn't for the theory of relativity. Instead, it was for his explanation of the photoelectric effect, which proved that light can behave like both a wave and a particle. This discovery quietly laid the foundation for quantum physics and modern technology, everything from solar panels to digital sensors. Rising storm in Germany. As political tension grew in Europe, especially in Nazi Germany, Einstein found himself in an increasingly dangerous environment. His Jewish background and outspoken views made him a target of hostility. The same country that once celebrated his genius was now turning against him. Escape to America. In 1933, Einstein made a life-changing decision. He left Germany and settled in the United States. He joined the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, where he would spend the rest of his academic life. It was not just a move, it was an exile from the land that shaped his early career. A world heading toward war while Einstein continued his research in peace. The world was once again moving toward destruction. The rise of World War II created a new fear: how science, the very thing meant to enlighten humanity, could also be turned into a weapon. Einstein's name, once tied only to imagination and theory, was now also connected indirectly to global political change, a mind beyond borders in America. Einstein remained focused on curiosity, not power. He spoke about peace, science, and human responsibility. Even as his fame reached legendary levels, he stayed committed to one belief: understanding the universe should bring humanity together, not divide it. For Albert Einstein, the story of his life was never meant to lead toward destruction. He sought understanding, pure mathematical universal understanding of how reality works. But history had other plans. The letter that changed everything in 1939. Einstein signed a letter addressed to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The message was urgent. German scientists might be developing a new and extremely powerful weapon using nuclear fission. Einstein did not build the weapon. He did not design it. But his famous equation, E=mc2, helped reveal the hidden energy inside atoms, an idea that made such a weapon scientifically possible. That letter became one of the most controversial moments of his life. The birth of the atomic age soon after. The world entered the Manhattan Project, the secret U.S. program that developed the atomic bomb. While Einstein was not part of the project, his name became indirectly linked to it forever. When atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, the world changed in an instant. Science had crossed a line from theory into unimaginable power. Regret and responsibility. Einstein was deeply shaken. He later expressed regret that his ideas had contributed, even indirectly, to such destruction. From that moment on, he became an outspoken advocate for nuclear disarmament and global peace. He once warned that if World War III ever happened, World War IV would be fought with sticks and stones. Final years in Princeton. In his later years at Princeton, Einstein stepped away from the spotlight of physics' newest revolution, quantum mechanics, because he could not accept its randomness at the fundamental level. Instead, he focused on something bigger, a unified theory that could explain everything in the universe. But that dream remained unfinished, a legacy beyond time. Einstein passed away in 1955, but his ideas never did. He left behind not just equations, but a new way of seeing reality, where time bends, space stretches, and imagination becomes the engine of discovery. His legacy is not only in science, but in a single truth he lived by: to understand the universe is to expand the limits of human thought itself.